Hi, and welcome to Pipes and Pondering. Over the past couple of months, I've thought a lot about the concept of romanticization and how oftentimes people romanticize everything from other people to other time periods to video games and other forms of media. And I think I'm going to spend this video and the next two talking about the concept of romanticizing and to see to what extent it's bad and to what extent I think it's actually very important. So this video is going to talk about romanticizing the past, that being the idea of nostalgia. Then the next video is going to be about romanticizing the present, which is oftentimes termed the honeymoon phase, and then romanticizing the future, that I'm going to label as hype, right? Whenever you're hyped for a new movie that's coming out, a new video game, so on and so forth. But for this video, analyzing the idea of nostalgia, I think that in our culture, there is a ton of nostalgia, but it's very fractured, that we don't necessarily have only one or two major groups that is lobbying for one or two past time periods to go back to. We seem to have a plethora of groups, whether it be on the political spectrum or into the thousands of different aesthetics that we have, right? Whether it is a cottagecore aesthetic, or if we long for an older version of a TV show, right? That we have nostalgia for the first 4 seasons, but it's been going for 14 seasons, right? There's this idea that we do find a lot of people longing for the past, but usually not in the exact same way. And obviously, there are a ton of different examples we could pull from, but I think for a bit more of a humorous example, but one that we can delve into from my personal background, is from the first generation of Pokemon games. That as a 90s kid, Pokemon was my thing, absolutely loved it, played so much of the first generation. The second generation, I think I put even more time into. And then after that, I still enjoyed the games, fell off for a bit, and came back to it in more recent years. And one reason why I think this is a good example is that people who are fans of the first generations within the Pokemon community are known oftentimes as Gen 1ers. That the stereotype is that Gen 1ers disregard Pokemon from future generations, saying that they have absolutely terrible designs, even though some of the Pokemon from the first generations had arguably equally terrible designs, if not worse. We oftentimes are known for complaining about the easy difficulty of modern Pokemon games. And sometimes these complaints are valid, oftentimes they're not. And what I'd like to argue in this video is actually argue that the first generation of Pokemon is, if not the worst, is definitely one of the worst. Obviously, there are a lot of different points that we could come up with, but I'll mainly stick with two, the graphics and then the gameplay. So when it comes to the graphics, there is a debate about whether or not Pokemon should have remained a 2D franchise rather than going into the 3D realm with the 3DS. But there is no debate that Gen 1 is artistically the worst version of 2D Pokemon. That some of the back sprites especially are absolutely terrible. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and compare it with a remake of Generation 2. Now, this remake was technically done during the 4th generation, so we see that there has been a large amount of graphical improvement, but besides just the technology, we see everything from the color palette that is a lot more vibrant, a lot more fascinating, and that the sprites are a lot more detailed, obviously, because the 2DS was able to handle a lot more. And because of this, there's really just no competition. That Gen 1 is artistically probably the worst of the Pokemon games. The gameplay, too, is extraordinarily weak. That if you know how to break the game, there are one or two core strategies that you're able to use and be able to just blaze through pretty much the entire game. The gameplay that you're seeing right now is a poor attempt by me doing a Nidoking run. That's one of the most popular strategies. To serve as a good, concise example of why the gameplay is very flawed, let's take a look at Pidgey. This is an early route bird that you catch in the first generation. And with Pidgey, in the first generation, he is one of the many Pokemon that are just downright boring to use. That Pidgey only learns 7 moves from its level up moveset, and it can only learn an additional 14 from rare items that are known as TMs. This is a very lackluster move pool, but we see in the remakes that I mentioned of Gen 2 that we see that even Pidgey, just this very basic early route Pokemon, is far more interesting. That instead of the 7 moves that it can learn through level up, it can now learn 13, excuse me. And the TM list, instead of only being 14, is now expanded to 24. That Pidgey, like the vast majority of other Gen 1 Pokemon, are better and more enjoyable to use in later games. There's the valid question of, for me, if the first 2 generations are so flawed, especially the first one, is it foolish for me to have more affection for these original games than some of the more modern ones? And personally, I would argue no, that my nostalgia isn't necessarily a bad thing, as long as I can understand the flaws of the first generation, and I can still appreciate improvements that are brought about in later generations. G.K. Chesterton has a phenomenal quote that I think is kind of getting at the bottom of reality when he's talking about love. He says that love is not blind, it is bound. And the more it is bound, the less it is blind. That if we view nostalgia as just being completely blind, that really isn't love. That might be affection towards something that is from a bygone time, but it's not love. That it's just blind adherence to the past. Proper nostalgia understands flaws and accepts them. That it's able to look at these things from the past that we have affection for and say, yes, these are the good things about it, but here are also the potentially myriads of flaws that those things have as well. And essentially, this is what any good remake does, right? That any good remake or sequel, that it takes what was good about the first, and then it says, okay, this is what's good, let's keep that, and then let's try to improve on the areas that it's weak. And this concept shouldn't just be applied to nostalgia for video games, obviously, or other types of media. There are far more potent examples of nostalgia that occurs within families and various religions. How many times are people rightly criticized for blindly following their fallible families or very flawed religious upbringings? This happens constantly, and this is what most people, not most people, but a lot of people go through. And what these people should do when they have this nostalgia is not completely condemn their family or their religious upbringing. Maybe that's needed, but they shouldn't just outright think that's what they should do. Instead, they should be able to take what's good and learn to improve or put away everything that's bad. So in my personal experience, I've been very blessed by my parents. I'm blessed by the love that they've shown me and the morals that they've instilled in me. But like everyone else, they are very flawed, right? I've had some things I've had to unlearn from them. And I've had to reconsider, as I've started my own family, how I want to raise my children differently so that hopefully they won't have as many flaws as I do. Now, there will certainly be flaws in the way that I raise them, but hopefully, and this is one thing that my dad told me when I was younger, hopefully my kids will have less that they have to work through than I did. That hopefully, ideally, it'll get better generation by generation because of this process of working through nostalgia. taking what's good and then leaving what's bad and trying to correct it. So, when viewed this way, the concept of nostalgia is actually really vital with trying to understand the past correctly. That it helps us to kind of sift through what we've gone through and to hold more tightly to the good aspects of our past, while also being able to understand the past flaws and also the flaws that it's instilled in us. That it's only through the sifting of nostalgia that we can really begin to wrestle with who we are and what we've been through. And it's through being bound to the past and trying to correct it rather than trying to completely sever ourselves from it. And I think this is a good place for us to stop as we consider this idea of romanticization. That romanticizing the past, I would argue, is actually a very good thing, depending on what definition of romance you're working from. The more modern definition of romance is to view things through rose-colored glasses, to view things in an improper light, have them completely whitewashed. And in that way, romancing the past is absolutely terrible, because not only are you blinding yourself, you are harming the present, and you're not actually loving the past because you are holding on to a view of the past, but not what the past actually is. But if we take a look at what romance used to mean, this was all the way back in the Middle Ages, it used to mean an adventure. And to view nostalgia as a type of adventure, the adventure of our lives, is, I think, a much better and more exciting and more fulfilling way to view it. That any good adventure, as everybody knows, has its perils, it has its things that went wrong, but from any adventure, a good adventurer will take lessons from it. And I think that's what nostalgia should do for us. It should make us more excited about life, make us be able to understand the goods in a much deeper way, but also teach us pitfalls and how that we can actually improve our lives and society as a whole because of those pitfalls. And it's only through nostalgia that we're able to wrestle with all these things, by romanticizing the past, not through rose-colored glasses, but through the cover of an adventure novel. So let me know your thoughts on all this. This is obviously a bit of a deep reading of my love for Pokemon's first generation. But let me know your thoughts about nostalgia and romanticizing the past and the different types of romanticization. And let me know what you think. Smell you later.